Chandad, que chinadi naro, que chinadi nave, rave, basonedius navalaste yutu. Reciban un cordial saludo de un pueblo ancestral, Teotitlán del Valle, lugar de los dioses. Please receive greetings from an ancestral community, Teotitlán del Valle, the place of gods. My name is Porfirio Gutierrez, and I'm an honor to come before you and share my art and culture. Hopefully, and I pray for everyone that it's well and safe in these difficult times. I am blessed and honored to come from this part of the world called Mesoamerica. The Zapotec nation, my ancestors settled in this part of the world thousands and thousands of years ago. I come from a state called Oaxaca. This is in Mexico. My community is called Teotitlán del Valle. Oaxaca state, it's about 200 miles southeast of Mexico City. And in my community, it's about 30 minutes east of Oaxaca City. We are in a region called the Central Valley. My ancestors began to develop and write a system, mathematic, archaeological sites that you still see some of the remnants today. One of the most iconic ones are Mitla and Monte Alban. The designs you see on the Mitla, one of the images you see here on my screen, are one of the source inspiration for our communities. Again, they develop a writing system, calendar. They work many artwork on gold, jade, ceramic. A lot of our history was documented to the ceramics. I was honored, and I feel honored and blessed to be born within this tradition. They're in the inherence, this rich culture and information that has been endured for thousands of years was inherent to me. And I learned it from my parents. We dance, our dances revolves around our faith, our community, and the greater being. We honor our loved ones through the offerings or the ofrendas that we put on the altar every year that they come and visit us during Day of the Dead. The corn began to develop in our area at least 6,000 years ago. And for us, that is part of our sacred seed or sacred food, corn, beans, and squash. This information, I learned it from my parents, Amado Gutierrez and Andrea. They are my first teachers, and they are the people that has planted the seed within me, the knowledge and wisdom from a very young child. One of the memories growing up is we hike up into the mountains to collect the plants that we needed for making our dyes. And almost like a pilgrimage, my parents would take us up on special days. As we hike up into the mountains, they'll tell us each story, or they tell us the stories or where each plant are grown, what are the name of them, what are the time to collect them, what are the colors that they'll give us. It's something that it's extremely important to me, which much more later in my life, I became much more mindful about, is that they would always tell us that the plants are alive just like us. They said to always respect Mother Nature because it's a divine being and it's alive. That there's no reason just to cut down any trees if you're not using it for either for home, either for food, for medicine, or for art. My mother's a healer, and a lot of her healing she does with medicine, traditional plants, and but something that is very special that she used is the water. And especially, and I say special, it's because it has her treatment, one of her treatment has to be done up in the mountains, because she said that the mountains, it's delivering, or the water, it's bringing the knowledge and wisdom and the force of Mother Nature. And it has to be done in the water, in the mountains. These are the knowledge that I grew up with, collecting the plants, treating the plants. But another thing that I became much more mindful, this is when I was younger, I was a shepherd for maybe about 3 to 4 years. And it's something that I haven't really had the opportunity to talk about. But I was recently listening to one of the elders and saying that us with the people, indigenous people within communities, we learn to live or to understand that we are part of nature, and that we don't own nature. Instead, we are an extension of nature. We are part of the land. The food we eat, our medicine comes directly from our land. Even today, my parents and my siblings still farm. And when I'm back in Oaxaca, I get to participate in all ways of life aspects. So that reminds me of for me, the importance of understanding that I'm an extension, or I am part of nature. And I think that way it really has helped me to understand the respect as well. I began to weave when I was 12 years old formally from my father. But ever since, I remember either helping out in different aspects, collecting the plants, winding bobbins, and perhaps the tools that we use or my parents or my older siblings used to weave their pieces. It was our toys. Those are something that we grew up with. So our craft, it's deeply rooted to our lives and everyday lives from a very young age. I often say this, that three things that it's really important that someone like myself or someone within our community in Teotitlán that we were fortunate to be born is that as same time as we're learning to say our first words, but at the same time, it is the same time that we're learning our ways of life, which is farming, which is weaving. These are gifts that my ancestor has given us. So I feel fortunate just because I was born in my weaving tradition. The gift was automatically in my hands, which is the weaving tradition. At 18 years old, I had a silent time, and that I migrated to United States, which I still split time between California and my hometown in Teotitlán in Oaxaca. And being away did really help me to understand, to find myself, and to be much more mindful about my culture identity. And it gave me such of inspiration and the need to reconnect with this cultural identity. When I was growing up, I was weaving just like my siblings and my friends within the community. But when I left and came back again, I discovered that the weaving tradition that I grew up with was my passion. I discovered that it was important for me to resume and reconnect with this art form that's known as the weaving. Growing up, seeing that the traditional natural dye was already on the verge of extinction. So when I went back to my community, and this is about almost 10 years of silence there, I became to understand that not much has been changed in regards to the natural dye. That equally has inspired me to not only resume my weaving, but to continue with this art form and bring the memories of the ancestor through each piece me and my family would make. I started to weave and form my studio as always, as traditional has been, involving families and community members. And my parents, at that time, they were already in their late 60s or early 60s, I'm sorry. So they were starting to getting tired, and this type of work, it's very labor intensive. So I invited my siblings who wanted to participate in this journey with me. And Juana and her husband, Antonio, and her family has been supporting me and being with me since then. I began to spend, or now at least the last 15, 18 years of our lives, begin to build on from the traditional knowledge that we've learned from my parents. And it's about 10 or 12 different colors, all from different plants. Begin to do a lot of research, a lot of experimentation inside and outside of the community. And now we have been developed at least 200 colors, all from just natural sources within surrounding us in our community. Some of the arrays of colors that you see on this image either come from plant fruits or insect. The insect is called cochineal, and it is something extremely special for us. Even the plants or the fruit gives their spirit or their life to create color. And when I think about, or when I say that plants are alive just like us, sometimes it might be a little difficult to actually understand that. But when I speak about an insect, I think our brain could start to simulate that a lot easier. An insect that can give you a color. And if we look at the color beyond that, what it is, it's a color. If we look at it beyond color, it's a living being. It is something that's alive, that gives this her spirit in order for us to be able to create art and to have the red color. To me, it is something very special. It is something very precious, and it goes beyond, you know, what we see as the color itself. It takes about 60 to 70,000 insects to make 1 pound of dye stuff. And these are all female insects. They grow on prickly pear cactus. And it takes roughly around 1,000 to 1,200 leaves of prickly pear cactus to make 1 kilo of dye stuff. My ancestors, or the ancient Mexico, began to use cochineal insect for their art, medicine, and the color itself has been such an important element or symbolic element for ancient Mexico. It was used in different ceremonies. It relates to our blood, to the sun, and spirit, and many other spiritual aspects. And one of them is ceremonies, burial ceremonies. But when I think about the color itself, I begin to meditate about not only the difficult or the labor intensive of, or the chemistry or the alchemy, if you may, process of actually creating the color red. I think beyond that, and I think about the importance of the color itself, even today in our community. 3 times or 4 times a year, depending on the dates, women wears a red sash, a red skirt, or an enredo, and participates in a procession, a ceremonial procession within the community streets of our community. Although, or when I meditate about this, although the reason why we do certain things, we might not know it, we just grew up with it. We know it's important. We know it might be sacred. And because within the colonization, a lot of information has been erased. But thinking about this and talking to one of the elders in the community, it say that we do certain things, or certain things are precious and sacred to us because these are the memories of the ancestors. Not many generations ago, someone that becomes widow has a specific enredo color that they wear. A gala, it's a specific color. For a wedding, it's a specific color. And now for this procession that happens still in our community, the red, it's a symbolic element. It's something precious within our community. When I was start to understand, when I was growing up, I began to create and show some intention of creating something different. And one of the first things that I did, I was probably 13 or so, I've actually wove my bag to take to school. And that I remember clearly because I made all the decisions to make the bag. And as I grew up and migrated to the United States, the contrast of life in a country that's very modern, very contemporary, versus a life that's very traditional, deeply rooted to the ancestors' beliefs and worldview of things. When it becomes together, and when you're involved migration, it is absolutely inevitable that you're gonna be influenced or you're gonna be inspired by the present day. And it's exactly what happened to me. thinking about the bag, thinking about that, I'll start to show some of the intention of designing at a very young age. It came to me much later in life as a construction worker in the United States. This is about 10 years ago or 15 years ago. In fact, about 15 years ago, I had the privilege to visit a lot of incredibly beautiful homes through my construction work. And by having that opportunity to visit these homes, there was something about the architectural shapes, colors, and materials that some of these homes were made out of. My first encounter with contemporary was through the architects, through the architectural buildings and homes. It was not through a museum. It was not through any other artist or painting and so forth. Instead, it was through an art form as well, an art form with the architects. To me, some of these homes are incredibly beautiful in the shape, and only a creative mind could do something like this. And although at that point I didn't understand the deepness of designing or maybe the arts, other than what of course I've learned from my parents, the traditional aspect, their knowledge and wisdom within the arts, but it's something that we grew up when we live with. Now with the architecture, I begin to have a reference to something else other than where I came from. And I think that's where the turning point of my work started to. I begin to reimagine and re-narrate and tell the story of not only to the traditional design that was made in textiles, but instead some of these traditional mats like petate. It's a palm leaf mats that has been woven in our community at least 6,000 years ago. And it's being used in everyday life and also in ceremonies. So the rich information that it's found within my culture, that it's found within ancient Mexico, that it's found within our state, it is such an important information for me that I often, actually not often, that the whole time I go back and go in that pool of information, and from there I abstract and I process certain information, but yet through a much more contemporary and a Mexican-American worldview of things, and the influence from the architect for modernism and minimalism that I'm now inspired by. So a lot of my work began to be extremely minimal and contemporary. This is a body of work honoring the petate, the palm leaf mat I was just talking about, and it's called Rituals or Rituales. This exhibition or this body of work was shown in a solo exhibition at the Textile Museum, and the silhouette you see on the walls there are to show or depict how these mats were actually used or has been used or still used in our community. The movement of the materials and the simplicity of the design and the color itself, the combination of two colors, it's something that I'm really drawn to. And then my work and this information gets processed and being presented this way on the loom. This is one of the, also another work that not only honors the petate, but also honors the cochineal insect, the importance of not only the color itself, but also the history and the sacredness of these insects and the color itself. I'm extremely drawn by the movement of the colors itself that alone creates a design. Again, the palm leaves, it is woven more like a basketry. So it creates these movements of materials that it's often, you know, something that I'm really drawn by and I'm interested to conversate with. Other elements that I grew up with, these specifically weaving some of these pieces, are some of the grecas, and one of the remnants and archaeological site that I showed earlier. The designs you see on the wall, they're even today, it is part of big inspiration for my work. Instead, these information, again, it continued to honor the past, but also the present and the modernism and the simplicity of things. But my information, it's still being abstract within where I come from and within the knowledge and wisdom that my parents shares and continue to share with me. Honoring one element, but also honoring some of these older materials like the agave fiber, or these are fibers that has been used for thousands and thousands of years. The wool was brought to us by the Spanish, as well as the frame loom or the thread loom that we use today. But prior to that, my ancestors was using cotton, agave fiber, other plants fiber, and process them really fine way to make clothing. And this is a good example of it. This is all dyed, or the blue part, it's dyed with indigo, of course, and then just natural plant fiber. I was always interested to continue honoring the same designs that I grew up with, but a very personal way. This is a very special design to us that we refer to as the butterflies. Many of my design refers to as the journey of the butterflies, and that is in conjunction with Dia de los Muertos, for Day of the Dead. We believe that when someone passes, their spirit and their soul goes to live in a spirit world, and they come to visit us every year for Day of the Dead, November 1st and 2nd. And within our community, just few days before this celebration, you begin to see really big black butterflies. And we believe that these are the spirits that begins to arrive, and that's gonna be part of the celebration. This is a design that it honors that symbolic element and the journey that the spirit takes from worldly life or the life on earth, underworld, into the spirit world. Other designs that inspired on a specific textile, like the saltillo sarapes, a style of textiles that begin to develop with the merging of the influence or the colonization when they arrived in Mexico, and the sensibility of the indigenous weaver that wove all these pieces. So these are some of the work that I'm truly drawn by, because I'm honoring my ancestors, weavers, who often was slaves and weavers, and that they were showing their artistic sensibility, and later on it also became part of my source of inspiration. This is another particular design that I'm really drawn to. This design I refer to as the corn plant. It is also is a design within what was developed, the merging of these two the culture that I'm talking about with Spanish and indigenous people. But what I like to share here on this particular piece, it honors the corn. The corn, it is something extremely special for us and for my family even today, because we still farm our lands. And the older people, and when I was growing up, or even now that my father still farms, he picks up one of the biggest and the most beautiful corn on the cob still. When he harvests, he chooses the most beautiful ones and puts them on the altar. I asked him one day, which I knew this, but I just want to hear what he was going to say, that why he does that. And he said that he wants to thank the greater being and the gods that for another year of harvest. He said that with not corn, our nation or our people probably would have not made it throughout the times. I understood that for him and for us, the corn, beans, and squash is sacred. When there's harvesting time, all the squash goes under the altar. That's where we actually store them. And when I think about all these things, it is something subconsciously that we do, that we're not saying it maybe with words that, oh, the corn is sacred for me, or the squash sacred for me. That's not what I hear every day. I learned those things by the actions of my elders or my parents, and even today, like I said. my dad still does that and still puts the all the squash under the altar. This particular piece here, it is part of the Saltillo inspiration I'm talking about. And this body of work I refer to as fragments. That is, it is a fragmentation and what was created centuries ago, part of fermentation of my culture as well. So the blue part represents the celestial space. All the dots that you see on these pieces are the sacred seed, which are corn, beans, and squash. And all the elements you see on the right side of the piece represents the candle or the light, which is something extremely important for us within the family. One of the greetings of our community in our culture would say, may the light and the greater being accompany your life and your path. Every time when I travel, my parents would always give me the blessing on the altar, and I'll kneel in front of the altar. And these are some of the words that they'll tell me. This is another designs within the fragment series. And this particular piece, it's the offering, or it's called offering or ofrenda. Again, it's the light, it's the sacred seeds. Muchísimas gracias por su tiempo. Thank you guys so very much for taking the time to come and join me. I deeply appreciate the international folk art market for giving me the opportunity to show my work and to share my culture and my tradition and to share my journey as well. I wish everyone that is that they're well and safe during this difficult time. May the greater being bless all of you. Thank you guys.